The assignment. Agent Tony Spears grabbed his passport and his Beretta. His next mission was calling. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he thrived on the adrenaline rush of the unknown. His partner, Agent Josie Jackson, was already waiting for him at the airport. Her cool demeanor and sharp wit always impressed him. This time, their destination was Moscow. The bustling Russian capital, with its imposing architecture and air of secrecy, was the perfect stage for espionage. Their mission was simple: infiltrate and neutralize a dangerous criminal organization known as the Russian Mafia, which had its claws sunk deep into the city's underbelly. Tony and Josie had to work quickly and discreetly as the fate of nations rested on their shoulders. They boarded the plane, settling into their seats. Tony couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on his back. He knew the risks involved, and also knew that failure was not an option. Josie, ever the professional, pulled out a file, already reviewing their intel. She was a master of disguise, fluent in multiple languages, and an expert in hand-to-hand combat. Together, they were an unstoppable force. Their cover story was straightforward. They were Mr. and Mrs. James Morgan, a wealthy American couple on vacation. It was a believable facade, one they had perfected over countless missions. Their alias allowed them to blend in, to observe, and to strike when the time was right. As the plane soared through the night sky, they went over their plan. Moscow awaited. The game was afoot. Destination: Moscow. The plane touched down in Moscow. The city sprawled beneath them like a concrete jungle. Tony and Josie disembarked, immediately enveloped in the throngs of people. They hailed a taxi heading towards the heart of the city. The driver, a burly man with a thick mustache, eyed them suspiciously in the rearview mirror. Tony ignored him, his senses on high alert. Their destination was the Hotel Metropol, a historic landmark known for its opulence and grandeur. It was the perfect place for them to blend in with the city's elite. As they checked in, Tony couldn't help but admire the hotel's intricate architecture. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and plush carpets lined the floors. It was a world of luxury, a stark contrast to the gritty reality of their mission. Their room was spacious and elegantly appointed, with a breathtaking view of the city. But Tony and Josie knew better than to get comfortable. They immediately set about transforming their room into a makeshift command center. Laptops were pulled out, weapons were checked, and surveillance equipment was strategically placed. Every detail mattered. Every precaution was taken. They were in the lion's den now. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Tony and Josie prepared themselves for the long night ahead. Their mission had only just begun. Moscow, with its secrets and dangers, awaited them. They were ready. The Metropol. The Metropol lived up to its reputation. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, casting dancing light across the opulent lobby. Tony and Josie, disguised as the Morgans, moved through the space with practiced ease. They drew curious glances but no suspicion. Their cover was holding strong. Back in their room, Tony busied himself with their surveillance equipment. He set up cameras discreetly, ensuring every angle of the hallway was covered. They couldn't be too careful. Josie, meanwhile, reviewed their intel on the Russian Mafia. Their leader, a man known only as Volkov, was a ghost, rumored to be ruthless and cunning. Tony finished his sweep and joined Josie, peering over her shoulder at the grainy photographs. "Anything we can use?" he asked, his voice low. Josie tapped a photo of a nondescript warehouse. "This is our best bet. It's rumored to be one of their main storage facilities." Tony nodded, his mind already working on a plan. They needed to get inside that warehouse. But first they needed information, and they needed to find a way to draw Volkov out of hiding. Their mission was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Whispers at the Chalyapin. The Chalyapin cocktail bar was a haven for Moscow's elite, a place where deals were struck and secrets whispered. Tony, nursing a scotch, scanned the room, his eyes sharp behind the rim of his glass. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the murmur of hushed conversations. He spotted Josie at the bar, her fiery red dress a stark contrast to the dark wood and leather. She was in her element, effortlessly blending in with the crowd. Her eyes met Tony's, a silent message passing between them. They were in position. Now they waited. A man slid into the seat beside Josie, tall with slicked back hair and a cruel smile playing on his lips. This was Dmitry Volkov. Tony was certain of it. They had no concrete intel on his appearance, but something about the man's demeanor screamed danger. Tony watched their exchange, his hand hovering near his concealed Beretta. Volkov leaned in close, his voice a low growl in Josie's ear. Tony strained to hear, but their conversation was lost in the din of the bar. He saw Josie's smile widen, her eyes glittering with a dangerous light. She was playing her part perfectly, drawing Volkov in. Tony couldn't wait to dismantle his empire piece by piece. This was just the beginning. Tony slipped out of the bar, leaving Josie to her charade. He melted into the shadows, his steps silent on the cobblestone streets. He had a meeting of his own. A contact, a whisper in the wind, had promised information on Volkov's operation. He reached a deserted alleyway, the stench of garbage and despair heavy in the air. A figure emerged from the darkness, his face obscured by a hooded cloak. Tony approached cautiously, his hand resting on his Beretta. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford in this line of work. "You have something for me?" Tony asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure nodded, extending a hand from beneath the folds of his cloak. In his palm lay a small metal disc. "This contains everything you need to know about Volkov's plans," the figure rasped. Tony took the disc, his fingers brushing against the figure's cold, clammy skin. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" he demanded. The figure chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Let's just say Volkov made a lot of enemies. Consider me a concerned citizen." Before Tony could press further, the figure melted back into the shadows, leaving him alone in the darkness. He stared at the metal disc in his hand, a sense of foreboding washing over him. This was it. This was the key to bringing down Volkov's empire. Back in the safety of their hotel room, Tony wasted no time. He sat down at the desk, the metal disc cold in his hand. Josie watched him, her expression unreadable. "What did your contact say?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He didn't say much," Tony replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Just that this disc contains everything we need to know about Volkov's operation." A sense of urgency filled him. He had to get into that disc, had to see what secrets it held. The laptop whirred to life, the screen casting a pale glow across Tony's face. He inserted the disc, the drive clicking softly. A progress bar appeared, agonizingly slow as it crawled towards completion. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, the disk finished loading. A single file, encrypted and password protected, sat on the desktop. Tony's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the key to bringing down Volkov and his empire. But first, he needed to break through those digital walls. The clock was ticking. Josie leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing Tony. "Anything interesting?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. They had worked together long enough to know that silence meant something big was brewing. Tony glanced up from the laptop, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You could say that," he replied, his fingers still dancing across the keyboard. "It seems Volkov has a thing for antique weapons, valuable ones. He had managed to bypass the encryption, revealing a treasure trove of information. Shipping manifests, bank account details, even blueprints to a high-security facility on the outskirts of Moscow. This was more than they could have hoped for. And guess what else?" Tony continued, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "He's hosting a little soiree tomorrow night. An auction, actually. Some of the city's most influential figures will be there. This was their chance. A chance to strike at the heart of Volkov's empire." Shadows and suspicions. The following evening, Tony and Josie found themselves at a lavish estate on the outskirts of Moscow. Music drifted from the grand ballroom. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, a stark contrast to the danger lurking beneath the surface. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Tony, disguised as a wealthy art collector, caught snippets of conversations. Whispers of deals, of alliances forged and broken. He felt a presence beside him, a hand lightly brushing his arm. A woman, her emerald green dress a splash of color in the sea of black ties and evening gowns. "You must be Mr. Morgan," she purred, her voice a husky whisper. "I've heard so much about you." Her eyes, dark and alluring, held a hint of mischief. Tony recognized the game, the dance of seduction and secrets. He played along, his instincts screaming at him to be careful. This woman was dangerous, he could feel it in his bones. But he needed information, and she seemed like the perfect source. The hunter and the hunted. Josie, meanwhile, had her own target in sight. A man, his face etched with the harsh lines of power, stood at the edge of the ballroom, his eyes scanning the crowd. This was Viktor Antonov, Volkov's right-hand man, a ruthless enforcer known for his brutality. She approached him, her movements fluid and graceful. "Mr. Antonov," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "I was hoping I might have a word." Antonov turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. Josie met his gaze, her expression cool and composed. "And who might you be?" he asked, his voice gruff, laced with suspicion. Josie smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "A friend," she replied, her voice barely audible above the music. "A friend who knows a few of your secrets." Antonov's eyes narrowed further. He took a step closer, his hand hovering near his jacket pocket. Josie held her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. They were playing a dangerous game, a game of cat and mouse, and the stakes had never been higher. Operation Red Dawn. The pieces were in place. Tony and Josie had spent the night piecing together the information from the disc along with the intel gleaned from their encounters at the auction. Volkov's plan was far more ambitious than they could have imagined. He wasn't just a ruthless crime lord, he was a threat to global security. They had contacted their respective agencies, MI6 and the FBI, relaying the gravity of the situation. A joint operation, codenamed Red Dawn, was swiftly put into motion. Their objective: storm Volkov's high-security facility, seize the weapons and bring him to justice. The facility, located on a desolate stretch of land miles outside of Moscow, was a fortress. High walls, razor wire, armed guards patrolling every inch of the perimeter. It would be a suicide mission to attack head-on. They needed a plan, a way to infiltrate the compound undetected. Tony studied the blueprints, his mind racing. There had to be a weakness, a vulnerability they could exploit. And then he saw it, a small, seemingly insignificant maintenance tunnel leading into the heart of the facility. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. Under the cover of darkness, a team of elite operatives from MI6 and the FBI approached the facility. They moved like ghosts, their footsteps silent on the frozen ground. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Tony and Josie, armed to the teeth and equipped with night vision goggles, led the way. They reached the maintenance tunnel, its entrance concealed by a rusted metal grate. Tony produced a set of bolt cutters, the metal snapping with a sharp clang that echoed through the night. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and decay. They moved slowly, their bodies pressed against the cold, wet concrete. Every creak and groan of the pipes above sent shivers down their spines. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the tunnel. A heavy metal door, secured with multiple locks, stood between them and their objective. Tony pulled out a small electronic device, his fingers working quickly as he bypassed the security system. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. They were in. The corridor led to a vast warehouse, its interior illuminated by rows of industrial lights. Crates were stacked high, their contents hidden from view. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their faces grim, their fingers hovering near the triggers of their weapons. Tony and Josie exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. They had to act fast before they were discovered. They split up, melting into the shadows, their movements fluid and precise. Tony crept along the wall, his senses on high alert. He reached a junction, peering cautiously around the corner. Two guards stood talking, their backs to him. This was his chance. He drew his Beretta, the metal cold against his palm. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. And then, with a swiftness born of years of training, he struck. The sound of gunfire echoed through the warehouse, shattering the silence. Josie, her reflexes lightning fast, took down the remaining guards with deadly accuracy. The air crackled with tension, the smell of gunpowder stinging their nostrils. They had secured the warehouse, but their mission was far from over. Volkov was still out there, and he was not going down without a fight. They raced through the facility, following the sound of gunfire and shouting. They found Volkov in his office, a lavishly decorated room overlooking the warehouse. He stood by the window, a pistol in his hand, his face contorted in a mask of rage. He turned as they entered, his eyes blazing with defiance. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with the threat of violence, and then, in a flash, it was over. Volkov lay dead on the floor, a bullet wound in his chest. The mission was a success, but it had come at a cost. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. They had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. The warehouse echoed with the ghosts of gunfire. Smoke swirled in the air. a grim reminder of the violence that had unfolded. Tony moved through the aftermath, his footsteps heavy on the concrete floor. He checked on their team, ensuring no one else was injured. Josie joined him, her face pale but composed. "Josie, it's done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Tony nodded, but the victory felt hollow. They had neutralized Volkov, but the Russian mafia was a hydra. Cutting off one head would only lead to two more taking its place. Their mission had sent ripples through the criminal underworld. The balance of power had shifted, and Tony and Josie knew they would be thrust back into the shadows soon enough. For now, they had a brief respite, a moment to catch their breath, to regroup and to prepare for the inevitable storm that was brewing on the horizon. Their work was never truly done. Rome welcomed them with open arms. The ancient city, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun, seemed a world away from the cold, unforgiving streets of Moscow. Tony and Josie, shedding their aliases like second skins, strolled hand in hand along the banks of the Tiber River. They had decided on a short break, a chance to savor a moment of normalcy before the next mission consumed them. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted from a nearby bakery, mingling with the aroma of strong Italian coffee. Life, in all its messy, chaotic beauty, went on. They found a small trattoria tucked away on a quiet side street. The owner, a jovial man with a thick moustache and a twinkle in his eye, greeted them like old friends. They dined on pasta, the flavors exploding on their tongues, a symphony of garlic, tomatoes, and fresh herbs. As they sipped their wine, the Colosseum looming in the distance, they allowed themselves a rare moment of peace. The weight of the world for just a fleeting moment lifted from their shoulders. They were just Tony and Josie, two people in love, enjoying a stolen moment in the heart of Rome. Destination, Morocco. The allure of Morocco was undeniable. The vibrant colors, the intoxicating scents, the ancient Medinas teeming with life. For Josie, it was a homecoming of sorts. She had been born there, her parents stationed in Casablanca during her father's time in the Foreign Service. They arrived in Marrakesh, the city a riot of color and sound. The air buzzed with the energy of 1,000 conversations, the scent of spices and incense hanging heavy in the air. They navigated the labyrinthine alleys of the Medina, their senses overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of Morocco. They sipped mint tea in a rooftop cafe, the Atlas Mountains rising majestically in the distance. They bargained for carpets and spices in the souks, the air thick with the scent of leather and sandalwood, and they explored the ancient ruins of Volubilis, the Roman city, frozen in time. Morocco was a sensory feast, a place where the past and present collided in a kaleidoscope of colors, cultures, and traditions. For Tony and Josie, it was the perfect escape, a chance to lose themselves in the beauty of a foreign land. A moment of reflection. Their hotel, a luxurious riad tucked away in the heart of the Medina, offered a sanctuary from the bustling streets below. They relaxed by the courtyard pool, the sound of the fountain a soothing balm for their weary souls. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, they found themselves drawn to the rooftop terrace. The city stretched out before them, a tapestry of ancient and modern, a testament to the enduring spirit of Morocco. They stood in silence, their fingers intertwined, their thoughts a tangled mess of memories and emotions. The events of the past few weeks, the raid, the violence, the weight of their responsibilities, it all felt a million miles away. For now, they had each other. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of Morocco, that was all that mattered. They were two sides of the same coin, forever bound by their shared experiences, their love, and their unwavering commitment to protecting the world from the shadows that lurked within. Mission accomplished. The success of Operation Red Dawn sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The Russian mafia, once a seemingly insurmountable force, had been dealt a crippling blow. Volkov's empire, built on a foundation of violence and intimidation, lay in ruins. Tony and Josie had proven their worth once again, their names whispered with a mix of admiration and fear in the corridors of power. Their superiors commended their bravery, their ingenuity, their unwavering commitment to the cause. Medals were pinned to their chests, their exploits celebrated in hushed tones behind closed doors. But for Tony and Josie, the true reward was the knowledge that they had made a difference, that they had saved countless lives from the clutches of darkness. Yet amidst the congratulations and accolades, a sense of unease lingered. The world of espionage was a dangerous game, a never-ending cycle of victories and losses. They had won this round, but the enemy was always lurking, waiting for the opportune moment to strike back. Tony and Josie knew they would never truly be free from the shadows. Their lives were forever intertwined with the clandestine world of secrets and lies, of danger and intrigue. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had earned it. A new dawn